The evening was filled with laughter and lively stories. Around a large wooden table in the spacious hall of an old countryside lodge, a cheerful group had gathered. Julia sat next to Andrew and her husband, who had arrived a little late for dinner. Across from them sat Arthur, a new employee at the company. Formally, this was a corporate picnic organized by Julia's workplace. Under different circumstances, after spending time outdoors, everyone was supposed to return to the city the next day. Andrew knew that his wife was a beautiful and successful woman. They both had great jobs, 2 wonderful sons aged 13 and 14, and life seemed to be going just as they had dreamed. Complete happiness. However, over the past few weeks, Julia had seemed distant, as if something was bothering her. Andrew had tried to talk to her, but she remained silent. Julia had informed him about the picnic only one day before the trip. Without hesitation, Andrew agreed to go and arrange for their sons to stay with Julia's parents in the countryside. Still, he sensed that his wife was not particularly pleased with his presence, even though she said nothing aloud. During the bus ride, Andrew got to know Julia's colleagues. He had met Arthur briefly at a few New Year's parties, where Arthur had always kept to himself. Once they arrived, everyone settled into their rooms. Julia soon stepped outside, and after a moment's hesitation, Andrew followed her. He found her on the open veranda, talking animatedly with a young man and smiling warmly in response. A knot tightened in Andrew's chest. At that moment, a young coworker stopped beside him. "Are they having an affair?" Andrew asked quietly, nodding toward Julia and Arthur. "No, not yet, but the tension between them is like something out of Shakespeare," she replied with a sly smile. "They are both involved with other people, so for now it's just conversations. You can understand him, though. She approves his paperwork, and she constantly corrects his submissions." "And who is his wife?" Andrew asked. "Lauren. She works for another company. I have seen her a couple of times. She's very pretty," the woman said, chuckling softly. "Anyway, my husband is waiting. I have to go." "And you are?" Andrew asked. "Kate. And I am married," she replied with a smile. "Nice to meet you. I am Andrew," he said, masking his inner tension. Hearing this, Andrew realized what could happen if he had not joined Julia on this trip. From that moment on, he stayed by her side constantly despite her growing irritation. Evening fell. Conversations filled the hall, but the tension in the air was tangible. Looking at the abundance of alcohol, Julia smiled and said, "Andrew, tonight you can drink as much as you want, even to the point of seeing things. I will not stop you, but let's pretend none of this happened when we get home." "Gladly, my dear," Andrew replied with a slight smirk. "I will drink all I can." Despite her joking tone, Andrew picked up on the hidden meaning. He sensed she was trying to distract him, hoping he would become too drunk to notice anything. From conversations earlier, he knew Arthur was staying in room number 1 on the 2nd floor. Andrew watched as Julia and Arthur sat together discussing work. Seizing the opportunity, Andrew joined the conversation, using his knowledge of their shared university to guide the discussion. Arthur claimed he had attended the same school, though years later. However, with a few subtle questions about professors, Andrew realized within minutes that Arthur had never studied there. Meanwhile, music started playing and the party grew louder. Andrew quietly tampered with the speaker setup, switching a few wires. Eventually, the music stopped, and after a while, people began heading off to their rooms. Julia teased Andrew, "Shall I walk you to your room? Looks like you will not make it on your own." Arthur stood up, offering, "I will help." But Andrew replied in a perfectly steady voice, "No need. I am not drunk." "Are you sure you can walk on your own?" Julia asked, doubting. "Of course," Andrew said with a smirk. "Do you think you need to carry me?" Julia shook her head, surprised. "Amazing, you drank so much tonight." After a few more minutes at the nearly empty table, Arthur left for his room. Andrew and Julia headed to theirs. Once back, they lay down, but Andrew could not sleep. When Julia quietly slipped out of bed and put on her robe, he asked, "Where are you going?" "You are awake," she asked. "I cannot sleep," he said, sitting up. "Neither can I. I wanted to get some fresh air." Andrew put on a tracksuit and followed her. They stepped onto the porch together. Arthur was already there, smoking a cigarette. Seeing Julia, Arthur brightened until he noticed Andrew behind her. "Can't sleep either, Arthur?" Andrew asked casually. "Yeah, just having a cigarette before bed," Arthur muttered awkwardly. Smoking is a bad habit, Andrew said with a cold smile. I do not smoke often, and only good cigarettes, Arthur defended. Good ones? I doubt such a thing exists. All cigarettes do damage, slowly but surely, Andrew replied. Then, suddenly changing the topic, he asked, By the way, why did you not bring Lauren with you? Arthur raised his eyebrows slightly in surprise. Lauren? Yeah, your wife, Andrew said with a smile. Julia's reaction showed she had no idea Arthur was married. Andrew continued, Many people brought their families. We left our sons with their grandparents. What about you? My wife and her parents went to the beach, Arthur said, his voice tight. Future plans, huh? Anyway, I am heading to bed. Good night, Arthur added hastily and walked off. Andrew and Julia wandered a little longer before finally heading back to sleep, lulled by the cool night air. The next morning, Julia woke up to Andrew gently stroking her hair. Sleepily, she murmured, What are you doing? Many people are already up and walking around. Breakfast will be served soon. Time to get up, he said, smiling warmly. You are ready already? She asked, stretching. Yes, I have washed up and packed. We are heading home today. The morning flew by. Andrew stayed close to Julia the whole time, keeping her within sight. Finally, everyone boarded the bus and returned to the city. As they passed by Julia's parents' house, where their sons were staying, Kate, sitting up front with her husband, caught Andrew's eye and bit her lip tight, realizing she had unintentionally confirmed Julia's budding connection with Arthur. They briefly visited Julia's parents, shared warm hugs, exchanged stories, and then headed home. Once there, Julia started preparing dinner, while Andrew and the boys worked on their small projects. At dinner, their eldest son, Alexander, said, This morning, when you were still asleep, Grandma went to the market and brought back fresh mushrooms. She cooked them for us. They were really good. You ate them? Julia asked, alarmed. Yeah, they were delicious. Why? I need to call my mom and tell her not to give you mushrooms anymore. It is risky, Julia said firmly. They were with adults. Nothing bad happened, Andrew remarked calmly. Dad, can we go to Grandma's other house and pick mushrooms too? Asked the younger boy, William, with enthusiasm. Why not? Andrew smiled. It is only 7 o'clock. If we pack quickly, we can be there by 10. Andrew, you have work tomorrow, Friday, Julia reminded him. I have 10 days of vacation coming up, he countered, and I have some unused time off saved up. Andrew called his manager, who was also a good friend, and within minutes, everything was arranged. Alexander, William, pack up. We are heading to Grandma's for a week. You know what to bring, Andrew said. Should we bring the fishing rods too? William asked excitedly. Of course, Andrew replied with a laugh. The boys raced off to their room, eager to start packing. At dinner, Andrew absent-mindedly pushed his fork through his salad. Then, lifting his gaze, he said quietly, Julia, I am not a child. I understand perfectly. You like Arthur. I was just a thorn in your side on this trip. You had plans, and they failed because of me. Julia looked stunned, then quickly composed herself. Andrew, are you serious? You are jealous of Arthur? That is ridiculous. Where did you even get that idea? Do not say anything, Julia, Andrew interrupted calmly but coldly. You will regret your words later. I am not asking for proof. For me, it is a fact. I know my presence ruined whatever you had planned, but I am not here to supervise you. My trust is broken. I just cannot believe you are saying this. What got into you? She asked, wide-eyed. Nothing got into me. I simply saw everything clearly. I am taking the kids on a trip. We will be back in a week. What happens after that depends on you. I need a reason to believe in you again. Andrew, what proof do you even have? On what basis are you accusing me? Proof matters to you, not to me. You have to decide what you want. Us or Arthur. I have not made my final decision yet, but the disrespect you showed at that picnic, I am still digesting it. The final conclusion, you will hear when I bring the kids back. And one more thing. If your lover shows up in this apartment while I am gone, there will be consequences. At that moment, Alex burst into the kitchen, cheerfully announcing, We are ready to go. Andrew calmly set down his fork, stood up, and silently walked to the bedroom. Gathering his documents, a tracksuit, and a pair of slippers, he left the apartment without saying a word. Julia was left alone in the now empty apartment. She knew Andrew was right. The entire idea of the trip had been crafted to spend time with Arthur. Deep down, she had truly hoped that Andrew would refuse to come along. knowing how much he disliked corporate events, considering them a waste of time and even harmful for workplace dynamics. Arthur had always seemed like a pleasant man. Since his arrival at the office, there had been a natural camaraderie between them. They often discussed work matters, and Arthur had a way of making Julia smile with his light jokes. Yet over time, she realized he lacked certain professional skills and often got confused with basic concepts. Now, Andrew had placed her in an impossible situation. Julia could not imagine her life without him. She knew Andrew did not have hard evidence but he did not need any. She also knew that Arthur was never truly important to her. At most, she had imagined some innocent flirting during the company picnic, a hug, maybe a fleeting kiss. But when she found out that Arthur had booked a separate room for himself, it had felt like a warning, a line she was relieved not to cross. Julia understood that women in the office noticed everything, and she knew she could not let things get out of control. After Andrew left with the children, Julia stayed alone, washed the dishes, and stood before the mirror, deeply reflecting on her marriage. Losing Andrew was something she could not allow. If there was even the slightest chance to save their relationship, she was determined to fight for it. Meanwhile, Andrew, along with the kids and his father Nate, loaded buckets and baskets into the car and drove to the village. The forests surrounding the countryside were still wild and untouched, and the boys eagerly explored the trails. This village, where Andrew's parents lived, had always been a second home to them. The forests promised a rich mushroom harvest this year. Nate pointed it out as soon as they stepped into the woods. "It is a good year for mushrooms," he said. "These parts are so hidden that city folks do not make it out here." "Why not?" asked Alex. "Do they not know the way?" "They know the way," Nate replied, winking. "But they are afraid of snakes. There are plenty around here. Sometimes even a harmless snake can scare you half to death. Though, to be honest, we do have vipers. Look there. One is sunbathing right now." Seeing the snake, Alex and Will excitedly started running toward it. "Stop right there," Nate ordered firmly. "Are you planning to catch it?" "Yeah, we will take it home," they shouted. "Now, what did I teach you?" Nate asked. "In the forest, you do not touch snakes, hedgehogs, or harm wolves and bears," the boys answered in unison. "Exactly. And do you really think you could take on a wolf or a bear?" "Well, no," Alex admitted, frowning. "But we would never hurt them. And the fact that a viper's bite can be fatal, does that not tell you anything?" "Maybe we could catch a harmless snake instead?" Will suggested. "No, we are not catching anything. Just look at the viper from a distance and leave it alone." As they talked, the snake, sensing danger, slid into the underbrush. They continued their walk without any incidents. When they returned to the house, Maddie, Andrew's mother, clapped her hands in amazement. "Oh my, there is no way I can clean all these mushrooms by morning." "Do not worry, Mom," Andrew reassured her. "We will all help. We will sit outside and clean them together." Indeed, the whole family, joined by some of Maddie's neighbors who came to admire the harvest, sat down to clean the mushrooms. They sorted them. The red-capped scaber stalks were to be dried, and the white mushrooms would be marinated. Even with all the fuss, everyone managed to have lunch in turns, turning the work into a warm family gathering. Around 7 in the evening, Maddie was still bustling about in the kitchen with the mushrooms. A few minutes after the last bus arrived from the city, the gate creaked open, and Julia stepped into the yard. She greeted Maddie warmly. "Where is Andrew? Where are the boys?" "They went to the community center," Maddie said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I thought they would be asleep by now, but the center director heard that Andrew was visiting and asked him to check their old sound system. They bought it back in the Soviet days, or maybe even the Stone Age, according to Andrew. He used to fix it all the time before he left for college. And besides, the director's sister came to visit, so he will be back soon. Go find them and enjoy yourself." When Julia approached the community center, music was already blasting. Clearly, Andrew had gotten everything working again. She walked inside and headed toward the dance hall. Inside, young people and a few adults were dancing. On the dance floor, couples swayed slowly, and among them, she spotted Andrew dancing with a woman she did not recognize. The woman was petite and athletic, wearing a sporty t-shirt and blue jeans. Andrew, in his old shirt, one they had long ago sent to the village, still looked strikingly handsome. Together, they were the most attractive pair on the floor. Julia felt a surge of anger and jealousy, though she kept her face composed. At that moment, Andrew noticed her but showed no reaction. Their sons rushed to her, excitedly urging her to dance, but she declined, unable to summon the energy. The music ended. Andrew bowed slightly to his dance partner and went to shut off the equipment. The evening was over. The director announced, "Dance night is over. See you Wednesday." "Be sure to come," Andrew called back. He approached Julia, where the boys eagerly chatted about chasing a snake earlier in the day. "Hey," Andrew greeted her calmly. "Is something wrong?" Julia looked at him, bitterness flashing in her eyes. "No, nothing. I just came to see my husband and found him already dancing with someone else." "Julia," Andrew said seriously, "I was not flirting. I was dancing with Alessia. We went to the same school. She is a childhood friend." "You two looked very cozy," she said bitterly. "I do not know how it looked to you," Andrew replied, his voice steady, "but I take my marriage vows seriously. I always have. There was not even a hint of flirting. I would never do what you did. But by Friday, I will have all the answers I need, and I will consider myself free of those vows." "Andrew?" Julia's voice trembled. "There was nothing between Arthur and me," she pleaded. "If there had been more than what I saw, Julia, we would not even be speaking right now," Andrew said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "You betrayed me. Arthur stayed loyal to his wife. After this trip, he will go back to a happy home. But you will be left sitting in the ruins of our marriage, waiting for someone who might never come." "Can I at least say something?" Julia whispered. "Yes, but not now," Andrew said, cutting her off, "and only if it is the truth. I will know if you are lying, and I do not want to hear lies. Besides, we are home. We will talk after dinner. I have not said anything to my parents or the kids yet." They ate dinner in the usual family atmosphere. After the boys went to bed and Maddie finished cleaning the kitchen, Julia stayed behind to help, doing her best to look calm. Nate had already gone to sleep. Once everything was tidied up, Maddie wished everyone good night and left for her room, leaving Julia and Andrew alone in the kitchen. "So," Andrew asked, "what do you want to tell me?" "I do not want to wait until Friday," Julia said quietly. "What about your job?" His voice was cold and detached. "I have taken leave, then a vacation. After that, I plan to resign," Julia said, looking him directly in the eyes. "But let me explain everything. I will not deny it. Arthur did attract me. His flirting was light and charming, and I got caught up in it. But during dinner when you questioned him, I realized he never attended our university, and he had hidden the fact that he had a wife and children. But that is not the point. The important thing is, after you left, I had time to think. I saw my life from the outside. I realized how much I love you and how I cannot lose you. I want to spend my life with you and grow old by your side." She paused for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. "I do not know how believable this sounds, but it is the absolute truth. What I did was foolish and wrong, and there is no excuse for it. But I genuinely want to fix everything, and I am willing to do whatever you ask. I have learned my lesson. Please give me a chance to save our family. I promise I will do everything I can to rebuild your trust. You will never regret it." "Did you two plan anything during that company picnic?" Andrew asked, his voice tense but controlled. "No," Julia answered. "Our relationship never went that far. If you had not been there, things might have gone further. I think your presence held him back too, even though he was clearly unhappy about it." Julia sighed and looked into her husband's eyes. "Today, I disappointed him even more. I refused to sign any of his paperwork because it all needed to be corrected. I wrote a formal memo and submitted it along with my requests for leave, vacation, and resignation to the general director. Everything was signed, except the resignation. The general director called me in, asked what happened, and said he would personally verify where Arthur actually studied. He mentioned that Arthur lacked even the most basic knowledge. On the way here, I got a call from Kate," Julia continued. "She told me that Arthur threw his resignation papers on the desk and walked out without waiting for his final paycheck. All his work has been reassigned to her." "Did he try to contact you?" Andrew asked. "He did," Julia said quietly. "He called several times, but I did not answer. There is nothing left for us to talk about. I came here because I did not want to wait until you got back. Dad, I wanted to confess everything before you even stepped into the house. Everything is in your hands now. If you tell me to leave, I will," she finished in a whisper. Andrew sat in silence for a while, as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, he spoke calmly. "In the morning, I'm taking the kids fishing. I promised them. You can come with us if you want. But for now, it is late. Let us get some sleep." Time passed, and slowly Julia and Andrew managed to rebuild their marriage, though it was not an easy road. Andrew did not trust her immediately, but with time, there were no more doubts about her behavior. For her part, Julia never forgot the memory of that evening. Her husband, strong and handsome, dancing with a delicate and graceful woman under the loud music. That image stayed with her forever, reminding her how easily everything could have been lost. As for Arthur, after his sudden departure, he simply vanished. His fate remained unknown for a long time. Eventually, it was revealed that his wife, Lauren, had filed a missing person report, and after a year and a half, she officially divorced him. Arthur was declared legally missing by the court. It also came to light that he had never attended university and had once worked as a laborer on construction sites. And right away, I will tell you the next story. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to stay calm even though his heart was pounding wildly in his chest. He was filled with joyful anticipation as he left the office. Tonight was supposed to be special. For the first time in a while, Jack would be able to spend the night at home. Recently, his job had kept him working late shifts because his company was coordinating with overseas partners, and the time zone differences often caused scheduling conflicts. He decided not to tell his wife, Emily, that he was coming home early. It was the perfect chance to surprise her. On the way home, he stopped to buy a bouquet of her favorite lilies and a bottle of good wine. The drive seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. Jack kept imagining how he would walk into the house, wrap Emily in his arms, and they would enjoy a quiet, cozy evening together. Both Jack and Emily earned good salaries and were building a comfortable future for themselves. That made every opportunity to spend uninterrupted time away from work feel even more precious. When Jack finally pulled up to their countryside cottage, his happiness was quickly overshadowed. Emily's car was missing from the driveway. At first, he thought maybe she had to run an errand in town. The thought made him uneasy, but he knew her job sometimes required late meetings with clients. She was probably just running behind. Entering the house, Jack felt an oppressive wave of loneliness wash over him. He decided to call Emily to find out where she was. Dialing her number, he held his breath, waiting for her to pick up. After a few moments, she answered. Her voice sounded strangely distant and cold. "Hey, Emily, where are you?" "I got off work early," Jack said, his voice filled with excitement. A long silence followed, making him tense up. "I'm not coming home tonight," she finally said. Jack froze, confused. "What do you mean? Are you saying you will not be sleeping at home?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do I need to repeat myself? Did you not understand the first time?" She snapped back, her voice sharp with irritation, a tone Jack could not remember ever hearing from her before. He felt his heart tighten. "Emily, what is going on? Why are you not coming back?" "I have urgent work matters," she replied coldly. "Just do not bother me, okay? I will be home tomorrow." Her tone was so harsh and dismissive that Jack barely managed to contain his growing anger. "Emily, why are you speaking to me with such disrespect?" he asked, his voice rising with a mix of disappointment and hurt. "We will discuss this when you come back," he added, but all he heard was the cold click of the call ending. She had hung up. Standing there, gripping his phone, Jack found himself surrounded by a silence that felt heavier and more menacing with every passing second. The next morning, Jack sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tightly clasped around a mug of cold coffee. He had not slept at all, replaying the conversation with Emily over and over in his mind. Suddenly, through the window, he saw a familiar car pulling up to the house. Emily stepped out calmly, closed the door carefully behind her, and walked toward the house as if nothing unusual had happened. When she saw Jack sitting in the kitchen, she simply said, "Good morning," and without waiting for his reply, announced that she was going to take a bath. Without another word, she disappeared into the bathroom, leaving Jack sitting there, boiling with resentment. He watched her leave the room, barely able to believe what he was seeing. She had not even tried to explain herself. Her calm indifference sent a wave of bitterness and anger crashing over him. Without thinking twice, Jack grabbed his car keys and headed out the door. Jack slid into the driver's seat of Emily's car and immediately noticed the tablet on the dashboard. Without hesitation, he turned it on and opened the navigation history. There, he found the address where Emily had spent the entire night. His eyes narrowed and his fingers tightened around the steering wheel. A familiar but long-forgotten feeling began to rise within him, a mixture of pain and anger. Without thinking, he opened the glove compartment. Amid the clutter, he spotted a box of contraceptives. The package had already been opened, and one was missing. That was all he needed to see. A wave of bitterness and hurt crashed through his chest, mingling with the overwhelming realization of betrayal. Jack and Emily had not used any form of contraception in a long time. There had been no need. This fact alone confirmed his worst fears. Jack decided that today he would get some answers. 25 minutes later, Emily stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a silk robe, smiling as she dried her hair with a towel. Her relaxed, satisfied expression, as if nothing had happened, only fueled Jack's anger. He waited silently for her to sit across from him. When she finally met his gaze, a flicker of annoyance flashed across her face, but it disappeared almost immediately. "Do you not think you owe me an explanation? Where were you last night?" His voice was cold and tight, like a stretched wire ready to snap. Emily rolled her eyes slightly and sighed with a trace of irritation. "Jack, I already told you it was for work. There is nothing to discuss." But Jack had come prepared. He tossed the box of contraceptives onto the table between them. "Is this part of your work too?" "I checked your navigation history," he said with a bitter smile. "Whose house were you at all night?" The air between them thickened like a heavy fog. After a tense moment, Emily sighed again and shot him a dark look. "What gives you the right to dig through my car and my belongings?" she demanded. "You are acting foolish, Jack." Jack felt the anger inside him blaze even hotter. "I had to dig through my wife's things because my wife is acting suspicious," he snapped, his voice shaking with rage. "Or to be more precise, because she is betraying me and trying to make me look like a fool." Emily's head jerked up because her eyes flashed with stubborn defiance. It was not betrayal. Jack almost laughed at how absurd her words sounded. "So you spent the night at another man's house and you are saying it was not betrayal?" he asked with biting sarcasm, feeling his heart hammering faster and faster. "What were you doing, watching cartoons together? And the contraceptives, were they for filling up with water and tossing off the balcony at pedestrians?" Emily jumped to her feet, her face twisted with anger. She seemed to search for words, then finally blurted out, "It was not betrayal. It was gratitude. Jack, I was repaying Brian, and it was the first and last time I had to do it." Jack froze, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Some gratitude," he muttered, unable to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. Emily suddenly sat back down, leaning against the chair as if exhausted. Avoiding his gaze, she spoke more quietly, almost in a whisper. "I have been having serious problems at work. I made a few mistakes and they could have fired me. I invested so much into this job. I wanted to build a career," she continued, taking a deep breath. "It is a promising company and they pay well. You and I have plans, Jack, and I wanted to stay there for both of us." "And Brian covered for you with management?" "Money was not what he wanted," Emily said, lowering her eyes. "He just liked me." He hinted very politely that he expected a personal thank you. She fell silent for a moment, then looked at Jack and squinting slightly added, "I gave him what he wanted. It was only one night. I got no pleasure from it. I love you, Jack. Please, let us just forget it." Jack stared at her, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. Forget it? She really thought they could just erase what had happened? That this night, her so-called gratitude, was just a mistake or an accident? Emily looked down and noticed the bouquet of flowers and the bottle of wine Jack had bought the day before, hoping they would have a warm and cozy evening together. She seemed to pick up on his mood. Without saying another word, she opened the wine, poured it into 2 glasses, and held one out to Jack. "Jack, I really do love you," she said more softly, trying to add some warmth to her voice. "Yes, I made a terrible mistake, but sometimes in life, you have to cross certain lines to achieve something greater." She raised her glass as if proposing a toast to their relationship, hoping to erase all their problems with one gesture. Jack sat across from her, shivering slightly. He searched her face for any trace of sincerity, but her words now seemed hollow and distant. "Did he force you?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer deep inside. She did not even look surprised, as if she had expected the question. "No, Jack, it was my decision," she replied. He only hinted that he would appreciate a favor in return. "You have to understand, I needed his loyalty. No, I am not proud of what I did, but the circumstances left me no choice. Let us try to start fresh. Just forget everything. I promise it will never happen again." Jack nodded slowly, feeling a heavy wave of bitterness wash over him. "Forget, a mistake, it will not happen again. I hear you, Emily," he said, speaking slowly, struggling to suppress the bitterness rising in his throat. He took a sip of wine, then stood up and walked outside. The fresh air greeted him with a sharp, refreshing gust. He took a deep breath, feeling the anger throb inside him. His thoughts were chaotic, but one thing was becoming clear. He could not just let this go. Jack had always been proud of his self-respect and principles, and the idea that he had been made a fool of sent a surge of rage through him. His gaze turned cold and focused. He thought about divorce, but the idea seemed too simple, too easy. No, he needed Emily and her loyal friend Brian to understand the cost of their actions. He wanted them to feel the same pain they had caused him, to make them realize that betrayal comes with consequences. After a few minutes, Jack went back inside, making sure to appear calm and composed. He decided to play his part, pretending to be the forgiving husband who was ready to move past it all. "You know, Emily," he said, as if he had thought over her words, "I am going to try to forget this ever happened. It is not worth destroying our relationship over. Let us pretend none of it took place." Her face immediately lit up, and she smiled at him with relief. "Thank you, Jack. I knew you would understand," she said softly, adding, "You have always been smart and understanding." Jack nodded, pretending to accept her words. Inside, the storm still raged, but outwardly he remained composed. She had no idea that her understanding husband was already planning to teach both her and Brian a lesson they would never forget. On Monday morning, Jack drove to work, thinking about his next steps. He remembered that in Emily's company, there were strict rules about romantic relationships between employees. It was considered a serious violation and was punished quickly and firmly with termination. Jack knew that confronting the situation without proof would be pointless and might even backfire. Instead, he decided to move more carefully and create a cover for himself. He met with his manager, Paul, and requested a work assignment out of town. Paul was surprised by the request. Jack was a valuable employee who usually participated in important negotiations with international partners. Now suddenly, he was asking to be sent to a plant. "You are not exactly used to working in a factory setting," Paul said, raising an eyebrow. "What brought this on?" Jack smiled lightly and explained that he was exhausted from the constant pressure and needed a change of scenery. "Well, if that is the case, then a reset might do you some good," Paul agreed, and promised to arrange the necessary paperwork. That evening, Jack told Emily about the upcoming trip. Her reaction was calm and even slightly indifferent. She wished him good luck, thanked him for letting her know, and retreated to her room. His absence would not raise any suspicion, but this was only the first stage of his plan. The next day, Jack searched online for small acting studios that organized extras for various projects. He met with the director of one such studio and explained his idea. He wanted a group of young actors to play the part of random bystanders who would appear near Emily. The actors found the plan amusing, but subtle enough not to raise direct suspicions. Together, they worked out a detailed scenario for the upcoming performance. Once everything was agreed upon and rehearsed down to the smallest detail, Jack felt a sense of satisfaction. Emily had no idea what was coming, but Jack could already imagine her smile fading, replaced by panic and fear. Early the next morning, Jack left for his work trip, saying goodbye to Emily. She yawned and lazily waved him off as he drove away. Meanwhile, keeping to her usual routine, Emily went to her favorite cafe near the office for coffee and a croissant. The air was filled with the aroma of fresh pastries, and the familiar atmosphere gave her a sense of comfort. She placed her order and stood at the counter, waiting for her coffee. Just as Emily reached for her cup, a young man in a business suit approached. He glanced at her with a look of recognition, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile crossed his face. "Oh, it is you," he exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. "I recognize you. You are that woman who rewards her coworkers, turning dull evenings into something much more exciting. How generous of you." Emily froze. His words hit her like a bolt from the blue. She stared at him, feeling her heart pounding harder. "Excuse me?" she stammered, completely thrown off. The man smirked. His serious expression shifted into something disturbingly playful. "Such generosity," he added without waiting for a response, and then turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Emily in a daze. She stood there for a few more seconds, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. It felt like some bizarre mistake or a terrible coincidence. Shaking her head, Emily grabbed her coffee and croissant and hurried out of the cafe, convincing herself it had to be just a misunderstanding. The next day, despite trying to forget about what had happened at the cafe, Emily found herself heading back to the same place, convincing herself that nothing unusual had occurred. Sometimes people make strange comments. It does not mean anything, she thought. However, as soon as she placed her order and approached the counter, another stranger in a business suit came up to her. His eyes widened the moment he saw her, and a broad smile spread across his face. "Oh, madam," he exclaimed with a tone of admiration and respect. "I have heard about your generosity. It is truly impressive, sharing yourself for the sake of career success. What an act of true self-sacrifice." Emily turned pale. She stared at him in utter confusion, feeling a heavy emptiness forming in her stomach. "What are you talking about?" she managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. The man simply waved his hand dismissively. "Do not be so modest. People like you gain fame quickly. So selfless, always ready to lend a hand. It is really touching." He smiled at her one last time and walked away. Emily's hands were shaking as she grabbed her coffee. This could not be a coincidence. A wave of panic swept over her. People knew about her secret. She tried to calm the rising anxiety, but her thoughts kept returning to that night with Brian, the night she had believed would stay hidden forever. By midweek, Emily's nerves were frayed. She kept telling herself that it was all just a bizarre misunderstanding and that those strangers were making up wild stories. But the next morning, as soon as she placed her order, she was approached again. A young woman walking by stopped, smiled brightly, and said, "Oh, you are Emily, right? Everyone at your company is talking about how generous you are, especially with your male colleagues. Thank you for your kindness." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. Grabbing her coffee, she bolted out of the cafe. Her mind was in complete chaos. This was no coincidence. The third time someone had clearly revealed her secret, and it was spreading. Unable to bear the tension any longer, Emily picked up her phone and, after a moment's hesitation, dialed Jack's number. The ringing seemed endless, heightening her anxiety until he finally answered. "Yes, I am listening," Jack said, his voice sounding slightly tense, immediately throwing Emily off balance. "Jack?" she began uncertainly. I do not know how to explain this, but something strange is happening to me. People are saying things about me that they should not know." There was a moment of silence on the line before Jack responded, his voice sounding a little sharper. "Wait, Emily. I do not understand what you are getting at," he said, irritation clear in his tone, as if her suspicions were an insult. Emily hesitated, unsure of how to continue. I just wanted to ask if you told anyone about the conflict we had after that night, because I cannot explain what is happening otherwise. Someone must have spread this information." Jack's tone immediately grew harsher. "Did we not agree to forget about it and leave it behind us? You said so yourself. Why are you bothering me now? What is wrong with you? Maybe you are just imagining things." Emily felt even worse after hearing his words, as if she were to blame for this nightmare unfolding around her. No matter how hard she tried, she could not shake the suspicion that Jack knew more than he was admitting. She faltered, not knowing how to explain how she felt. Then Jack cut her off sharply. "You know what, Emily? I have work to do. I am at the plant right now, busy by the way. Stop bothering me with this nonsense." In the next moment, Jack turned on the video call, allowing her to see his face, with the noisy factory floor and workers bustling in the background. "See? I am here, and you are distracting me with your paranoia and reminding me again of what you did," he said, emphasizing every word. Emily's heart sank with shame. She sighed and muttered, "I am sorry, Jack. I guess I am just too nervous." "Then calm yourself down," he said curtly before ending the call, leaving her feeling even more confused. After the conversation with Jack, Emily's thoughts turned to Brian. Maybe he had been the one who told someone about that night. What if he had spread their secret behind her back? Unable to shake her anxiety, Emily decided to confront Brian directly. She waited until the office was quieter, then quietly slipped into his office to avoid being noticed. Closing the door behind her, she approached his desk and, leaning in close, asked, "Brian, did you tell anyone about us?" Her voice was shaking with panic. "About what happened between us? Are you out of your mind?" He whispered harshly, glancing nervously at the door as if afraid someone might overhear. "Why would you even ask that? I have not told anyone anything. If anyone finds out, we will both be fired immediately." Emily felt a mixture of relief and irritation, keeping a wary eye on him. "Something is wrong," she whispered, as if trying to convince herself she was not imagining things. "Get out of my office, now! Before someone sees you and gets the wrong idea," Brian said, rubbing his temples as if the mere thought of the risk gave him a headache. "And please, take something to calm down. You are not yourself. You are being paranoid." Emily stood there in confusion, feeling out of place. She wandered back to her desk, more lost than ever. She caught herself wondering if she really was losing her mind. Maybe she just needed to calm down. Maybe it was all just stress, she repeated to herself over and over again, trying to pull herself together. On Thursday, she decided not to go out for coffee at all and stayed in the office all day, avoiding any chance encounters. To her surprise, she actually felt some relief. "Everything is fine," she kept telling herself, exhaling the tension. It seemed like things were starting to return to normal. When the workday ended, Emily left the office feeling lighter. She walked slowly down the sidewalk toward the parking lot, silently rejoicing that the strange chapter seemed to be over. Suddenly, she accidentally bumped into a young man in his 20s riding a scooter. The impact caused her folder to fall from her hands and papers scattered across the pavement. "Oh, I am sorry," Emily said, flustered, as she began picking up the papers. The young man stopped, smiled, and without hesitation, helped her gather the documents. "Thank you," she said without looking up. "It was my fault. I was not paying attention." He handed the papers back to her and looked at her with a mischievous glint in his eye. "No problem," he said. "Sometimes secrets do not stay hidden, right? And I have heard about your generosity," he added with a barely hidden laugh. Emily's vision darkened with rage, and without thinking, she shouted, "You little—" Grabbing the folder, she hurled it at him. But the young man laughed gleefully, dodged the throw, and sped off on his scooter, leaving her standing there boiling with anger and despair. Struggling to hold herself together, Emily hurried to her car and drove home. The entire evening, Emily's nerves were on edge. She kept casting frightened glances at her phone as if expecting another surprise at any moment. Hundreds of questions raced through her mind, and eventually, unable to endure it any longer, she opened her laptop and began searching for a psychotherapist. She could not fully understand what was happening to her, but one thing was clear: she could no longer handle it alone. On Friday morning, Emily arrived at work, feeling tension gnawing at her from the inside. The night before, she had felt like she was on the verge of a breakdown, and now the only thought keeping her afloat was the upcoming weekend. She had even scheduled an appointment with a psychologist, hoping to manage her growing stress, but the meeting was not until the following week. Silently praying, she hoped the day would pass without incident. And indeed, the morning started quietly. Work consumed her, and even her anxious thoughts faded into the background for a while. Emily began to think she had made it through the worst and that perhaps everything would gradually return to normal. But closer to noon, that fragile peace was shattered. A courier entered the office carrying a huge bouquet of deep red roses, their strong fragrance filling the air. Emily felt every coworker's gaze shift from the flowers to her as the courier called out confidently across the office, "Delivery for Emily." Everyone stared at her, waiting for her reaction. Emily froze in place, a storm of anger and panic rising inside her. She rushed toward the courier, trying to keep her irritation under control. Why would you think this is for me? I did not order anything, and I am not expecting anything, she snapped. Several curious co-workers began approaching to see what was happening. It says right here, the courier replied, to the most magnificent and alluring woman, Emily, from Bill. For a moment, the office fell silent. Then quiet giggles and whispers rippled through the room. People exchanged glances. Losing control, Emily lashed out at the courier, unleashing a stream of angry words. The young man, clearly startled, backed away toward the exit, eager to avoid any more of her fury. The commotion quickly drew the attention of Mr. David, the director known for his strict discipline and tight control over the staff. He approached Emily, his stern gaze fixed on her. Leaning down, he picked up the card and read it. His face twitched slightly, but then he gave a restrained smirk and addressed the gathered employees. "All right," he said, scanning the crowd. "Looks like someone thought this would be funny. Let us move on, people. Nothing to see here." Turning to Emily, he added in a firm tone, "Emily, calm down. You probably just need some time off." Trying to ease the tension with an awkward joke, Mr. David added, "Everyone, back to work. No need to gather a crowd, and Emily, do not worry. It was just a joke. To clear up any doubts, you and Bill can take a lie detector test." The employees chuckled at his words and slowly dispersed, smiling and whispering to each other. Emily, meanwhile, could barely stop trembling. Fear and rage boiled inside her. Mr. David had not seriously considered any investigation. He had no real suspicions about Emily and Bill, but Emily's nerves had been stretched too thin. Something inside her snapped, and she screamed across the office, "Go to hell, all of you! Yes, I am sleeping with Bill. It is a magnificent love affair." Her voice shook, but her eyes blazed. "You are all pathetic, colorless rats, trembling with fear. Cowards! I do not care what you think." Her outburst froze the office. Everyone stared at her in shock, unsure how to react. Mr. David went pale and slowly sat down in the nearest chair, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, stunned by her words. The office was plunged into silence. By a cruel twist of fate, Bill was not present. He had been sent to finalize an important contract elsewhere. Maybe, if he had been there, Emily might have held herself together. But now, facing the stunned crowd alone, she could no longer bear it. Realizing she could not stay any longer, Emily grabbed her bag and rushed toward the exit, not looking at the stunned faces around her. Just as she reached the door, Bill entered the office, smiling broadly after successfully closing the deal. Emily seized him by the arm and shouted loudly, "Tell them, Bill. Tell them we are lovers. Let them all know. We are not like them, Bill. We are better. We are not afraid to show real feelings." Bill froze as if struck by lightning. His face turned blank with shock. Pulling his arm free, he looked around nervously at their coworkers who were all watching. "Emily, why did you reveal our secret?" He stammered, struggling to grasp what was happening. His words, spoken in that heavy silence, confirmed everything Emily had shouted. The employees exchanged doubtful glances while Emily, unable to endure another second, burst into tears and fled the office, slamming the door behind her. Bill stood alone, helpless, rubbing the back of his head, his face filled with despair and fear. Behind him, whispers and murmurs grew louder as the office buzzed with the scandal that was now impossible to hide. Jack returned from his business trip, and Emily immediately confronted him, bombarding him with accusations. She suspected he had orchestrated everything, but Jack just laughed in response. Furious, Emily grabbed a knife and threatened him, but Jack knocked it from her hand. In a fit of rage, Emily hurled a chair at the window, shattering the glass and releasing her emotions in a useless act of destruction. When the police and paramedics arrived, they cautiously entered the house. Seeing the strangers, Emily collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. She looked completely broken. Jack calmly explained to the officers that his wife had been drinking heavily and had suffered a severe nervous breakdown. He carefully hinted that she might be experiencing hallucinations brought on by stress and alcohol. He decided not to mention the full incident at that moment. Emily spent nearly a week in the hospital, receiving necessary care and therapy. Day by day, her condition improved, and by the time she was discharged, she was ready to return home and rebuild her life. However, reality greeted her harshly. Returning home, she found Jack's belongings gone, along with Jack himself. The house, once their shared sanctuary, now felt hollow. Her heart sank with suspicion. Grabbing her phone, she immediately called Jack, unable to hide the irritation in her voice. "Jack, what is happening? Why is your stuff gone? You just left without telling me." His voice was calm, almost cold, and each polite word struck like a blow. "Emily," he said, pausing to emphasize every word, "I simply cannot live with a woman who lost her mind over her own betrayal." Anger flared in Emily, but Jack continued, "Let us skip the drama. We will settle this in court. I have already filed the papers. And by the way, I have put the house up for sale. I am insisting that we split the proceeds 80 to 20, 80% to me, 20% to you. That is more than fair." Hearing this enraged Emily even more. She had no intention of giving up so easily. "I am warning you, Jack," she hissed. "If you think you are getting 80%, you are dreaming. At best, we will split it 50-50, or maybe you will end up with nothing after what you pulled. I have every right to demand a bigger share." Jack, clearly expecting this reaction, chuckled softly and replied with a hint of amusement. "Emily, first of all, I did not do anything. You brought this on yourself. And second, Emily, remember when you played dangerous games with a knife?" His voice turned icy. "Our house is equipped with cameras. You must have forgotten. Everything is recorded. So now I have solid grounds to demand a divorce on my terms. If you refuse, well, I could report you for threatening my safety. Or would you rather take some time to think it over?" This time, Emily's protests and fury did not help. It became clear that Jack had trapped her with no way out. Later, she begged him for forgiveness, pleading for a more fair division of their assets. But Jack remained unmoved. In the following months, the divorce proceeded relatively quietly. Emily received her 20% and had to accept her new reality. She tried to avoid seeing Jack whenever possible, and when they did meet, he remained cold and distant. Due to the scandal, both Emily and Bill lost their jobs. The company, valuing its reputation and adhering strictly to its principles, wasted no time in terminating their contracts. Their careers were shattered, and attempts to rebuild their professional reputations failed, their past now forever associated with disgrace. Jack achieved what he had set out to do. He taught Emily and Bill a harsh lesson, turning her betrayal into her downfall. Yet deep inside, there was a void that no revenge could fill. The years they shared, the memories of happier times, did not simply vanish. Though his mind told him he had acted justly, part of his heart still mourned the love they had once shared.